Okay, welcome. This is Trimaris Talks. This is our 8th session. Tonight we have the most illustrious Duke Mittion with us. And we're going to be working on the strategic and tactics of SCA Melee, but on a micro level, which is going to be a fascinating subject, I'm sure. Duke Mittion, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the SCA?
Sure. As a 18-year-old kid, I was like a lot of people wandering by Dreher Park, and I saw a bunch of guys out in in armor, doing crazy things. And some of the armor was, that what really interested me the most is that some of the armor that I was looking at ranged from like the really nice, uh, well-made suits of armor to people that were wearing what amounted to a trash can. And but they were out there having a great time, and that looked like something that I really wanted to do. And At the time, I was fencing collegiately for Florida Atlantic, and there was a guy there who one of the fencers there was telling me about the SCA and how cool it was. And I didn't put the two together that they were actually the same thing. But I was like, as I saw some guys out at the park doing this crazy thing, and he was like, that sounds like it. So I went out to the Dreher Park, and I went out there every weekend for like a month, and I would sit and watch. And then at one point, um, he wasn't a knight then, but Sir Terrell, our Baron Terrell, came over to me and was asking me if I was interested, and I was. And then spoke to Sir Koppel, who gave me a bunch of background information on the SCA. And those of you who were fortunate enough to meet Sir Koppel, he was just an amazing person. You know, um, he had a lot of information and gave me a flyer and all, just really cool stuff. And so Terrell put me in some loner armor, and got the crap beat out of me by Wolf here. Um, uh, some of you may know Duke Wolf here, Lion of Persia, and he eventually, which is probably another long, long story, but he eventually became my knight, and we fought together. And I still fight at Dreher Park, as you know, Richard. You would just join me there not too long ago, and so it's been. I think that was in '88 or '89 that I started. And see, when I say that, it seems like it was yesterday, but then I realize it's currently 2023. And so, yeah, it was quite some time ago. Right.
Sounds like a very normal introduction.
It was, but I honestly, I consider myself fortunate to have started in Sea March around so many wonderful people.
Mhm.
You know, um, it wasn't without its bumps in the roads. There were some challenges, but overall, I had wonderful people like Baroness Adelaide and Duchess Kayleen, who really looked after me and helped me in a lot of ways to understand what the SCA was all about. Not just a bunch of guys at the park, beating on each other, but the other side of it, the gentler side, the arts and sciences. And so I had a pretty well-rounded introduction in the beginning,
Do
as
you
well
feel like the
as.
SCA shaped you as a person?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I've I have spent more than half my life involved with this group, right? So, and like I said, I was 18 years old when I started playing in the SEA. And to be honest, I don't know. There's nobody that has anything figured out at 18 years old. It's not how it is. But I got really, really passionate about it, and I got really involved, and for a long time it kind of took over my life. And honestly, it probably still would you know if I hadn't become a dad. That sort of changed a lot of things for
Life
me.
journey. It's a life
Yeah.
journey. Tell me a little bit about when you became a knight. What point did that happen?
Mm. When it was supposed to, that much I can tell you. One of the things that I find to be most interesting, I guess, is in this on the journey is, like I've known people that start fighting and 5 years later they get the accolade, you know, and lot of times, 5 years after that you don't see him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was a little different journey, right? I got knighted, so I started fighting in '88, um, and got knighted in '98, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like about a 10-year journey, I suppose. And the interesting part about it is when I started in the SCA, fencing just kind of came into the kingdom, right? So because I had a fencing background, um, I was kind of pulled in two directions initially, right? So I got the white scarf in '94, so I was kind of splitting my time between rapier and heavy weapons, and you know, I enjoyed rapier, I still do, but but I was fencing collegiately, and you just can't you don't get the same satisfaction out of that, or I don't get the same satisfaction out of that I got from fighting heavy weapons. So that was really where my passion lied, and so although I continued to do rapier, I was pursuing that, and so my attention was kind of divided. But it was a challenge. One of the things is initially, you get involved with one group, then another group, and you know, um, like a lot of people, the first person that shows an interest in you and wants to help you, and next thing you know, you're riding with them, and 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 I didn't get the kind of advice I think that I give people today, which is, you know, um, if you give anybody in the SCA a chance, most of them are going to want to help you. Most of them are going to extend their hand and in friendship and camaraderie and give you some advice, give you some help, you know, and if you're looking for a relationship with a peer, with a knight in particular, if that's your path, if you decide that you want to pursue that, you know, it's not something that you should rush into, right? It's not something that you should just say, "Oh, this guy's nice to me. I'm going to go hang out with him, and eventually, maybe I'll wear his belt and whatever." You know, not that that can't happen and end up working out for you, but honestly, there's so many diverse individuals in this group, in this SCA, the whole thing. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't really get to know people and get to know a lot of different people before you make that kind of decision. To pursue that path,
The
because
advice
knighthood.
I was given when I started, and it's the advice I tell my fighters, even the fighters that have been fighting for a year, they haven't gone to a kingdom event. So
Mm,
for them, I treat them as if it's still day one,
mm,
because they're just, they just went to their first event and sea march in Christmas.
mm,
And
mm,
so I tell them, give yourself a year to meet
mm.
people on the kingdom level, get to know people before you make that decision or make that commitment. And not just to know them high by, but get to know who they are
Right, as
because
people,
they're
because yeah, you enter into that relationship and then you're married, right? I mean, for me, it's not one of those things where you can just jump in and out. If I'm wearing your belt, then I'm wearing your belt. That's it's a lifelong commitment. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and fortunately, I've been able to meet a lot of people that felt similarly, and we had a great time. But even today, if somebody comes to me and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to be your squire and have you help me on my journey," and even if I know them really well, I'm like, all right, well, we're starting our countdown a year and a day, so we'll see how this works. And if you still feel the same way a year later, they're like, a year,
Mhm.
like, and if that's your reaction, then I'm not the right guy for you.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? If you're like, okay, bet, let's go, then then it might work out. But
It's like a
that's then
test right there just to see how they respond.
yeah, it's definitely a litmus test right there. If it's not something you're willing to put the time and effort into, and it's interesting. I know fighters that are like, they have that goal, like, hey, I want to be a knight, and that's cool, you know. but you put in a lot of effort. It's a long road, and at the end of that road is another job. It's equally as long and probably more arduous, So um, I feel the same kind of way about Crown Tournament. I mean, um, it's the first time you win Crown Tournament. It's very exciting. You're entering a new chapter. you know, um, and it's an interesting part of your adventure. There's a reason why a lot of people don't do it twice. Because it is or it can be like a whole nother job. Like a whole nother full-time job. You're if you're doing it right, um, then you're really focused on the kingdom. You're focused on the people. You're making yourself available to the people. In ways that you may not. I mean, I'm an introvert. Believe it or not, and I don't really feel comfortable. Being in front of a group of people talking, and a lot of the things that the SEA has kind of forced me to do over the years. Which has helped me personally and professionally, to be honest, because without that experience of being in front of people and talking to people and being in that situation where this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's and the most important thing, and it used to be inscribed on the inside of the crown that says it's not for you, it's for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a wholehearted believer in that philosophy, which is, when you wear the crown, it's a lot. It has nothing to do with you. It's all about the people.
Well, as a Duke, you've won crown more than once. How many times have you won?
4 times. Yeah.
So why would you go 4 times?
You're going to ask me that question. All right. Um, so I mentioned at the top of this conversation, I mentioned Kayleen, right? And when I first started, Kayleen became like another mother to me. We were very close, and I loved her very much. And when I was a young kid, I was 18, 19 years old, and she was so sweet to me, so nice to me. And I told her one day, I said, one day, once I heard about crown and how people could become king, and say, well, one day I'm gonna make you a queen. And she kind of laughed and was like, yeah, whatever, son. you know, and 10 years later, I made good on that promise and I made her a queen. You know, the other lady that I had intended to make queen was Baroness Adelaide, who was another very special person to me. If Kayleen was like my mother, then Adelaide was like my aunt. And in the SCA, and unfortunately, I was never able to do that. I was supposed to fight for her the second time, and I ended up she backed out and ended up fighting with Ferdalcia, and won the second time, and then I was a duke. And if I'm honest with you, Richard, that Guillermo part, sorry, and then I was done after two. The only reason to do the second one was, it's like, hey, I'm a duke now, and I can stop. And then Kayleen, who I already mentioned that I love dearly, came to me and said, I want to be queen again. And I was like, oh, awesome. Max is looking for a consort, and I'm sure Max would be happy. And she goes, no, no, no. I don't think you heard me. I want to be queen again, and I want you to do it. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was the third one.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly thereafter, I met my lovely wife, Rose. And one of the things that I so loved about her was she had absolutely no interest in becoming queen at the time. And because we talked about it, and she was like, nope, don't want to do it. And I was like, yes, okay, yeah, that's going to work out. And then she happened to be friends with Zephrine, um, who was at the time she was on the throne with Thorsten. They were nurses, nurse buddies, and they used to talk nurse stuff. And when they won, I think it was the second time Thorsten and Zephrine won, and Zephrine pulled Rose off to the side and was like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you guys were our heirs? You know, and then I got the dreaded. We get in the truck to go home from that event. I think it was their coronation actually. We get in the truck to go home from the event, and I got the dreaded conversation that starts off with, "Honey, I was thinking."
Uh-oh.
And I was like, "Oh, what is it?" And she was like, "I was talking to Zephrine, and wouldn't it be cool if we were their heirs?" And I was like, "Oh, you lied to me. You said you didn't want to do it, and now here we are." And then so that was number 4. with
Mm-hmm.
my lovely wife. And and I have fought I have fought in Crown since with the ambition of making my lovely wife a duchess because I think that she deserves it. Um, but that and my kids have never seen us. We were on the throne before Jesse was born, so the kids have never really experienced that, and I thought that would kind of be kind of cool, but
Make it a
uh,
family affair.
yeah, but it hasn't really happened yet. My daughter would love it. Being a
Mm-hmm.
little Princess Royale, she would just lose her
Mm-hmm.
mind. So, but the business of being a dad come first for me these days. So between football coaching and karate and scouts and all the other activities that we do together, we haven't had a whole lot of time for the SCA in the way that I used to engage in it, which was an everyday activity.
Well, on that note, let me ask you about your experience at war
Hmm.
and fighting in melee. What is how? Because that's tournament fighting. What
Hmm.
was war like for you?
War was it, man. War was the reason to do this thing, right? So I mean, and I feel strongly that some people are there's you can kind of lump fighters into two groups, right? You have fighters that love the tournament, you know what I mean, and that's what that one-on-one competition, they love it and they strive for it. And I've never shied away from it, but man, my love has always been war. It's been melee, for the one of the first events I went to, believe it or not, I think it was like I want to say Penzik
Wow,
18 or 19.
your
You
first
know,
event was Penzik?
it was like my second. My first event was a war college.
Okay.
My first event was a war college. Like they used to call it Viking Foray back in the day, and it was a war college that they had right before Penzik. And Brennan, Earl Brendan was well, he was king at the time, and we went to Viking Foray and fought with them. And he was like, "Hey, you guys coming to Penzik?" And the guys that I was traveling with were like, "Yeah, we're going." And I was like, "We are." All right, cool. So we went to Penzik, and so that was like my second event was Penzik, and it was if you've ever been to Penzik, it's huge, right? I mean, it's a monster war. There's
Over
a
10,000 people.
yeah, a lot of people on the field and different groups and two chucks and stuff, and it was crazy. Um, it was exhausting, but it was huge fun, and of course, pickups after the thing, fighting people from all over was really cool. Um, but yeah, just I knew then, I actually at Viking Foray, I was like, yeah, this is it, right? The melees are cool. And then to see it on that scale that was like um mind blowing in a way. It was just like, this is the real deal. This is awesome.
And if
And so
nobody's seen that, all they got to go is YouTube and punch in Penzik in a year, and you'll
yeah,
see videos of what it looks like and how many people are engaging.
yeah, I've been to a lot of them.
Have you ever
Penzix,
been a general?
um, no, no, I have not. And one of the reasons for that, if I'm being honest, is that when I was king, um, and I had the opportunity to lead armies and what have you, you know, there's so much responsibility involved in being a general and trying to herd all those cats. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Especially in Trimaris, because if we're being honest, it's easier in some kingdoms where they have a more regulated militia, right? Where they have a standing army practically of professional soldiers that they practice together and they do things that we don't have never done as a kingdom. You know, Trimaris has historically always been just a collection of warrior households that
Hmm.
form an army, and not usually a big one, if we're being honest about it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But there are far more talented generals in this kingdom than me. One of the like I've always been in awe of people like Sakaro Kyberg, for example. His when we started doing Gulf Wars and they started building that fort, I mean, he was just in his element, man. He knew that thing. He's an engineer and he took measurements and he built a scale model and he had a mock up, and he had a plan, and I was like, let him do it. He's
Hmm.
got, he's the right guy. Also, I've had as king, I've had warlords like fortunate enough to have warlords like Duke Llewellyn and Earl Benin, that were leading the forces for me. And as the king, my job I think was more to to be out in front to show, to be a for the show, to be a leader for the people, something they can rally around. But as far as um, given the commands, sending people to where they need to go, and I mean, I've attended a lot of war councils and a lot of meetings, and I've sat in on them and I've participated, but just having that responsibility of overall leadership is nothing that's never really appealed to me,
Mhm.
because in when it comes right down to it, um, a good general can't lead from the front, man. A good general's got to stand up on the hill. He's got to see what's happening, or she is going to see what's happening, and in order to guide the troops effectively. I mean, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So, you got to be able to react, and you got to be, if you're smart about it, have your reserve forces ready and be able to fill gaps. And you know, man, I just don't have that kind of patience, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
Give me a sword, give me a shield, point me towards the enemy and pull the pin. Um,
No,
that's
it's
my.
good to hear this. It's another perspective, and
Mhm,
I appreciate the honesty of it, because not every, what started me on this path of having these classes is that at the last Gulf War, I heard two knights talking about how we don't have that many sergeants. We
mhm,
don't have many middle level commanders. Well,
mhm, mhm.
because most of them have been elevated to knighthood. The sergeants we had were made knights,
Well, it's
and
supposed to
now,
happen that way, yeah.
and now we don't have mid-level people.
Mhm,
And the households of Trimaris are, as I've learned, are not what they used to be. And
mhm,
so we haven't had a lot of melee training about tactics and strategies and how to work in melee. And
mhm,
so, and how to train these younger up and coming people.
mhm,
And so
mhm,
that's been kind of the inspiration for doing these talks and
mhm,
putting them on record. So if any of our young fighters want to become sergeants and want to understand how melee works at war, it's a tool for them.
So we used to do this really cool thing. We used to do this really cool thing, and we don't do it anymore, I don't think. But of course, I mean, let's take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not as active as I used to be. I mean, as a matter of fact, a lot of people, if you don't fight here locally, may not even know who I am. But the at war, they used to recognize, you know, refer to them generally as non-coms, not non-knights who are leaders on the field. They used to award them with, or sometimes even knights. We used to, whichever. I mean, if you were a leader on the field, they had award the Order of the Tremerian Lancer. That was really cool. It's a nice recognition for
Mhm.
a crown to bestow that just recognized you for being that leader. And it would be cool if we were still doing that. If not, to dust that off and bring that back, and because I think it's a nice. Um,
Somebody got the Lancer a few months ago.
oh, cool! So we're still doing that. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we've talked in previous classes about the different kinds of battles that go
Mhm,
for,
mhm, mhm,
and how we focused last session exclusively on field battle and on bridge battle,
mhm,
and kind of breaking those two down.
mhm.
But you were focused tonight. What you wanted to discuss a small unit fighting.
Right. Yeah. That's what.
Where if we're imagining, let's say, a battle, a field battle, where would small unit tactics be needed or come into play?
Cool. Well, I'm going to go back to that statement I made earlier about how no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So, um, you march out with a unit or your baronial unit or whatever, and you're like 20, 30 people strong, right? And then um, you get you get rushed, you get in the heat of the melee, and you look around, and invariably you find yourself standing around with by yourself or maybe a buddy, you know. And as I like to say frequently, one person on a battlefield isn't a unit. That's not that's a target, right? So one person, um, uh, you know, we all the hero of our own stories, right? And we want to go out there and we want to be William Marshall and we want to be, um, just or Hannibal, leading our elephants over the Alps and whatever. But the long and short of it is, one person on the battlefield is not terribly effective, right? So, um, small unit tactics, the smallest unit on the field is three. All right, in my opinion, is you get three people together, you can form a triad, and with a triad, it gives you a lot of different options. Um, it's mobile. It's a mobile unit, right? It's a agile unit. It maneuvers quickly, and it can, if used properly, can outmaneuver larger units. And with three people in a triad, you can make a huge difference on a battlefield. So the smallest unit is a triad, and we train, or used to, still do, but we used to train extensively in triad tactics because I mean you can link a bunch of triads together and have a battle line, right? You can have 21, 24, 28 people, whatever, and be a cohesive unit, but also be able to break down in those individual triads gives you options, right? Skirmish options that you may not have had previously, in a single monolithic type of shield wall. So in training in triad tactics is important because if you're going to find yourself in those situations. I mean, I know, Richard, you've been in a lot of battles. I have too, and you invariably will find yourself on the battlefield, in a small unit, and so the motto should be, if you're one person, you should go find two more people, right? Link up with another couple more people, form your triad and make a difference. So if you're one, find a buddy, and if you're two, find a third. Once you're in a triad, you can start making a difference. Until then, you should really be looking for somebody to fight with, right? Somebody to fight next to you. Triads, the makeup of a triad doesn't have to be like a pole arm and two shields. I mean, that's the classic triad, right? And we're going to talk a lot about the classic triad tonight, but honestly, you can do three shields. It still works. You know what I mean? Um, just as long as you have three people. Three people with the pole arm in the center actually, works pretty well because you have protection. On your blind side for the pole arm, which is really necessary. You have some range, and you can really. I've seen triads, of three people stop long battle lines of 20 plus people. You know,
I'm
um,
sorry, you said, what do you mean by blind side?
oh yeah, well we're going to get into that when we start talking about triads, but if you're a righty or a lefty, right, and you're fighting, let's say spear for an example, right? So if you're a righty or a lefty, your stance is gonna change depending, right? So if you want, let me see. Oh yeah, I will share my screen and show you. Um, yeah, this one. So let me know if you can see that, Richard.
Yes, we see it. It's fine.
Okay, so so what we're looking at here is, um, in a classic triad. So here's my shieldman. Here's another shieldman. Here's my pole arm, right? So from in this example, right, the pole arm, this pole armsman is a righty, right? So you can see that, although the image is, you're looking at a top-down image, this is the right side. So when I have the weapon on my right side, my defense is weaker on my left, right? So the shieldman on my left is going to be, this is what I refer to as the blind side, right? So the shieldman on my left is going to be primarily responsible for the defense of the unit, right? He's going to be he or she is going to make sure that, I don't get rushed on my blind side. If you're rushing a pole arm, by the way, and if this is news to you, maybe it's not, but if you have an opportunity to approach from the blind side, obviously it's going to be an easier kill for you than if you approach from the strong side. The strong side over here, of course, I have a right-handed pole arm and I have a right-handed shieldman. And so approaching from this side is going to be inherently more dangerous than the blind side. So in a triad formation, I consider this to be the blind side and this to be the strong side. Now, if we reverse this image and we have the pole arm on the left-hand side, then of course we're going to reverse our strong side and our blind side. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So since we're getting into the images, I guess we'll go ahead and talk about.
And you call that a classic triad with two
I do.
shields and a spear?
Yes. Yeah, for me that's going to be the classic. It's more of a classic kind of a, or let's just say typical triad, right? So here we go without the blind side arrows, right? So in this formation, right, we have our pole arm in the center, we have shields on to the left and right. Now, you may notice that they're not shoulder to shoulder. Like in a typical shield wall, pardon me, in a typical shield wall, you want your unit, shoulder to shoulder, shields touching, if not overlapping, right, to create the best possible defense forward facing. In a triad, we need to have a little bit more room. We need to open the formation up a little bit, right? And we're going to sacrifice that overlapping shield security for speed and agility, right? Not that we can't close the formation. We absolutely can close the formation. We can close the formation in a way that makes sense, especially if we're rushed in the center, right? What we would do in that case, this is an exercise that I referred to as closing the formation, right? So in this particular, in a classic triad, people are going to rush, your opponents are going to try to rush the pole arm because the pole arm is the dangerous point to most people, right? They're like, he's going to reach out and touch you. So if they're going to rush the pole arm, a lot of times they're going to try to rush. If they're smart, they're going to try to rush from the blind side. So in this particular example, what you're going to see is you're going to see the pole arm is going to back out and the shields are going to close, right? And what does that look like? Let me throw up another one real quick and let's do the whole screen that way you can see it. So the result of closing the formation should look something like this, right? So my pole arm is backed out, the shieldman is closed in, right? And so the whole purpose of a triad, right, and the maneuverability is to be able to bring more weapons to bear against an opponent, right? And your obvious question is, well, how do I do that if I'm three people and I'm engaging a unit of 15, 20 people, whatever. How are we going to do that? How do we accomplish having more weapons on a single individual? Because obviously if we go straight on, right, if we go straight on, that's not going to happen. Example, here's a so as you can see, this is no bueno, right? We have a triad and we have a shield wall, right? And the triad is going head on to against the shield wall. And in this scenario, that's the reason that's bad is I have people here and all four weapons are going to be brought to bear on these three people, right? Giving them the numerical advantage, right? So if I'm going to do this the right way, right, I'm going to maneuver my triad into to an advantageous angle, right? So instead of hitting that unit head on, I'm going to shift my triad one way or the other, usually to the right because that's my strong side, unless I'm a lefty, right? And then left will be my strong side. So now I'm going to hit that line and on, right? So now I have three weapons on one individual, right? And and that's not going to change as long as I continue to engage down this line. I have 3 weapons on one individual, right? And because this is a bigger line, they're not as mobile nor as agile as the triad. So as they maneuver, I can maneuver with them in order to keep maximum amount of weapons on one single individual, right? And honestly, I don't care who you are, whether you're a knight, a duke, or whatever. If 3 people are attacking you, especially from the flank, right? The odds are not in your favor,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can agree on that, right? They're just not in your favor. So small unit tactics, especially with a triad on an open field, right? The advantages are going to be agility, mobility, being able to maneuver faster than larger units to bring yourself to an advantageous position where you have superior numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even when engaging a larger unit.
Right. So I mean, the appropriate, I guess, response to this is to try to meet the flank by wheeling right if they see you coming.
I'm sorry, you're one more time, you're breaking up a little bit.
I guess the appropriate response for them would be to meet the flank, to wheel right, try to wheel right to be able to meet you and put you back into that head-to-head kind of
Let's talk about
equation.
that for a second, right? So here I am, in this. If I'm in this unit, right? Now we're the assumption here that we're making, right, is this unit is traveling in this direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the battle plan, right, there may be a unit somewhere downfield that this larger unit's supposed to be engaging, right? If you sit in the command meetings, right, a lot of times individual units are given specific um, roles in the battle, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this unit's role may be, all right, we need you to head downfield, and you're going to engage, the Ancioran left, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in that there may be a couple of baronies out there with strong baronial units, and your objective as a unit may not be to go out there and win that engagement, but to go out there, hit that unit, punch them in the nose, and make them stop,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that, you know, especially in a field battle, it's all about mobility, right? The more mobile forces generally are the victors. That's
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, if all things are equal, right, and you're similar in numbers, you know what I mean, mobility is going to win the day for you, right? Being able to turn and take advantage of advantageous angles, right? In flanking maneuvers are going to win the day for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you got the numbers, then who cares? You're just going to envelop the enemy, and you're going to win that way because you're going to bring more weapons to bear on a smaller surface area, right? That's just envelopment's the way to go. But as a triad, as a small unit, right? This unit has a mission, it has a purpose, right? And my purpose is I'm harassing the enemy, right? If I engage this individual, right, and let's say this individual decides that he's going to stop, right, then he's going this way, the rest of the unit's going that way. Um, I can either kill this guy, 3-on-1, you know what I mean, or I can ignore this guy and keep moving down the line. Eventually, I'm going to get the attention. This line's going to either rotate or it's going to stop to engage me, right? Either way, they're no longer accomplishing their objective,
Right.
right? They're not going to go down the field and punch another unit in the nose, stop them from being mobile, because that's what we just did to them. But we did it with a numerically inferior force, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking advantage of what is undoubtedly human nature, right? Because you're on the battlefield, and you have a unit that's trying to engage you from the flank. You've seen firsthand, right? The reaction is going to be to turn to engage them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Even though that's not your mission, right? You're going to turn and engage them, and if you do, you run the risk of stalling your entire unit. Now, the smart thing to do, and a lot of commanders are going to do it, is that they're going to have um, they're going to have reserve units in the back, more skirmishers, right? So the smarter thing to do would be to have this reserve unit, and once your unit's getting flanked, right, then you're going this reserve unit is going to come out here and engage the skirmishers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you apply the same, if we applied the same tactics, right, then they can come out here as a triad, hit this triad in the flank, right? And then this unit can keep on going about its business, which is ultimately what you want them to do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So the long and short of it here is, you know, from a larger unit perspective, the reason that you have reserves and you have second ranks is so that you have units that can split off, right, and engage flankers to stop you from accomplishing your mission. If your battle plan doesn't account for that, right, and you're just out there with a single shield wall moving down the field, assuming that you're going to accomplish your objective, odds are you're not going to, right?
But wait a
Um,
minute, going back to just the unit, just the
mhm.
triad, um, you got three guys. How do you get it so that you're a unit? How do you get it so that you can do this? I mean,
Well, if you have an individual, right? As you mentioned, you were talking about sergeants, right? And I think that that's that's kind of the role that they're looking to fill, right? So you have a sergeant on the field, somebody who has a veteran of some battles, right? Has some experience under their belt. Um, they can collect two individuals, right, and go out and make a huge difference on the battlefield. Even if those two individuals have no prior experience, right?
mhm.
Now, having said that, if you have some individuals with whom you train and you do melee on a regular basis, and let's look at it, the usual practice. I mean, it's rare that you go to a practice and there's going to be 20, 30 people there. I mean, I know some of the practices, on the I-4 Beltway, like Red Bug and different practices, they may have that many people, you know, um, but our local practices certainly don't, you know. So finding that many people to melee is challenging, as you mentioned, but if you have six people, you can break up into two triads and do lots of interesting melee practice. And practicing as a triad is very, like, as I mentioned before, you can take two triads, join them together, right? And then you have a six-person unit, right? Um, you can add more people triads to that and have a bigger and bigger and bigger unit, right? Um, but at its base, that smallest unit being the triad to break off, if we're marching out to battle, Richard, and we have let's say 21 people with us on this field battle, and and all of them are trained in triad tactics. I'm not going to have a 21 shield front. There's no point to that, right? So what I'm going to have is I'm going to have 18 shields in the front. I'm going to have a triad in the back. So as we're marching towards our objective, whatever objective we're assigned by the general, the warlord, or the king, you know, um, if we get engaged by another unit, then I'm going to send a triad out to engage that unit to flank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? While the rest of the unit continues on to its mission. And I can continue to break that unit down into three-man units to accomplish various tasks that may need to be accomplished while I'm on the battlefield. Right.
So earlier you talked about how when a triad is in a skirmish formation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the spearmen might be a few steps ahead, and then they have to close. How is that
I
accomplished?
wouldn't say I wouldn't say a few steps, right? So, um, uh, if if I was to show the video from practice where when we were working on that, um, one of the things that when you guys actually, yeah, I can show it. Hold on, because I think we're right there. Would you mind watching a little video with me?
Sure,
Okay, so let me share that so you can see. Let me know when you can see it.
it's up.
Okay, so in this video, right? Let me see. I'm going to kill the audio, right? So when you guys first lined up, right? I'm going to stop the video right here. So when you first lined up, you see how close you're in close order formation, right?
Mhm.
So you have the shieldmans are way too close, and you there in the center, you have no room to work, right?
Right.
There's nothing for you to do. I mean, you might be able to get a pull over their shield or whatever, but you're not going to be able to fully utilize that weapon effectively, right? So as we progress, one of the first things I do is I'm looking at that unit and I'm like, nope, that's not going to work, right? So we're going to adjust the formation, right? So these guys are going to be just off your shoulder, and if I actually get out of the frame, you'll be able to see the formation here. So if we stop it, that's a bad place to stop it. Let's here. So you're still in a line, right? You're still in a line abreast, right? But there's probably like half a fighter gap between you, right? And that gives each member of the triad room to do what they need to do, right? So as the pole arm in the center, you're going to be responsible for the entire front 180 of that unit, right? So
Mhm.
with the shieldman on your left protecting your blind side, and the shieldman on your right is your on your strong side, you have a wide range of options for engagement, right? Also, you get a better view of the battlefield. You're going to see more things. It's like the difference between wearing an open face helmet and a slotted visor, right? You slotted visor, you have a view of the battlefield that's only an inch wide, right? With an open face helmet, you get to see a little bit more. But so the having that open formation gives you a lot of options. Now, as we talked about earlier, when somebody rushes you, you can close that formation. And I don't know if that's in here. It might be. So
But
yeah,
how
here.
how would you do that?
How would we close the formation?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. It's like the graphic that I showed earlier, but let's see. I think we have the video of it here.
would the
Oh,
spearman call
yeah.
it out? Would there be some command?
So if you don't have a unit, let me go ahead and stop sharing because we're going to have to track that video around. So let me put that image back up. Um, and put that image back up where we talk about, yeah. So uh, let's open closing formation, right? So yeah, don't say. So in the formation that we just saw in the video, right? You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, I just see you.
You just see me. My bad. Okay, let me share that again. Okay. So see it now?
Yes.
So in a if we got three guys together on the regular, right? Um, Zoom quit unexpectedly. Can you still hear me?
Could you repeat that?
I said something about Zoom stopping unexpectedly.
I can hear you now. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
I can now.
Okay.
Sorry, told me that Zoom stopped unexpectedly,
Okay.
but you can hear me now.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, so back to what I was saying. If you have experienced individuals who train in a triad, right, they're going to see this rush coming, right, and one or any of these individuals can be like, "Hey, we got to rush," in which case the pole arm knows to back out. The shieldmen are going to close formation. Um, if you're not, if you don't have an experienced triad with you, right, or you're on the field and you collected two other people, who may not be as experienced, right, then you're going to be leading from the center, right. So the person in the center, in this case, the pole armsman, is going to make the call, right, the close formation. Now, if these guys haven't practiced closing formation, hopefully at least they've had some shield wall training where they understand that close formation means to come back shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
Uh, if not, there may be a conversation that you want to have prior to giving that command, right? So, but it generally, it works really well. It saved my bacon many times, right? And the end result is this. So here comes our lone rusher. He's rushing the pole arm. My pole arm is backed out. My shieldmen have closed ranks, and now I have 2-on-1.
Right on. So the key is communication.
Oh, the key is always communication. So on the battlefield, communication is king, right? So one of the things there's two things there's really no substitute for in the battlefield. One is intelligence, and two is communication. um, if you know what the enemy's going to do, right, then you have an advantage, right? So intelligence is always key. You know, if you have somebody in your element, somebody in your unit, or you have a good unit commander or general, they're going to be able to take a look at that field, see how the units are moving, you know, and gather that intelligence quickly, and hopefully they have the apparatus in place to take advantage, right?
Mhm.
To be able to issue, you know, new orders to units, have them change up, change objectives in the middle of the battle, and communication, communication wins battles. So on the smaller unit side of things in the triad, right, it's no different, right? Communication is key, right? It's really important for individual triad members, to all get the same information. Um, to know what the triad's doing. You don't want one shield wandering off, especially if it's on your blind side. You
Mhm.
don't want that shield wandering off and leaving the rest of the unit exposed, right? So
Mhm.
um, it's important that even though you're not in close order formation, that they have a good situational awareness around them, and understand where their teammates are, and one of the benefits of having a pole arm in the center of a triad is that you can kind of see that weapon. It's you should always keep it in your periphery, right? So
Mhm.
in my experience, right, if I get rushed quickly and I'm backing out, giving, once they see that pole arm start to retreat, automatically they should be closing formation.
Mhm.
And if you train together, that'll be second nature. You won't even have to issue a command. That'll just happen.
Mhm.
you know but I would practice it, right? Because here's the thing, even though it seems like it's a no-brainer, right? Like it seems like it's just the right thing to do. The fact of the matter is, the battlefield's distracting, right?
Mhm.
There's people running every which way. There's all kinds of clamor, the noise from the weapons clashing and the armor, not to mention the spectators. You know what I mean? There's a whole lot of things going on. You know,
I guess situational awareness is the ability to look beyond that and see what's actually going on.
well, situational awareness, yeah, it's that's part of it, right? But situational awareness is also being aware of the fact that I'm in a small unit, right?
Mhm.
I don't have necessarily somebody to my right or my left. If I'm in a large shield wall marching across the battlefield, right, then I am wholly dependent on the people to my right and my left, for my
Mhm.
personal protection.
Mhm.
Just as I'm responsible to if I'm on this person's left and I'm guarding their left flank, if I'm on this person's right, I'm guarding their right flank. In a shield wall, in the center of a shield wall, there's actually a great deal of security, right? Because
Mhm.
I have this whole line of people that's out here protecting my flanks. In a smaller unit, you have to have a greater situational awareness because you don't have that luxury. You don't have a lot of people. You're, um, some people who serve may be familiar with the concept of speed of security, right? I don't have the security of a bunker. I don't have the security of solid cover, right? So I got to be fast. I got to move. You know, I can't just be in one place waiting to be hit, right? So the key to small units success is movement, being agile, being able to move quickly and to change up quickly, and you can't do that with more than one person, right? Without being able to communicate effectively. So when we're talking about battlefield communication, there's a lot of distractions, a lot of noise, right? So we got to be loud, right? And the first thing I'm going to tell the guys to my right and my left, right, if I got shieldmen, is like, hey, if you hear me say something, you better repeat it. Say it out loud, right?
Mhm.
Just so the person next to you understands what we're doing.
Mhm.
If we're, for example, when we're at practice, we call a shift, right? Shift right. You know, if I say shift right, and me and you move right, and our fellow third, moves left, and then we're exposed, right? And this doesn't work out. So good communication, loud communication, repeating those commands. That's a habit that every person who's engaging in melee should be training themselves in. If you're whether you're in a large shield wall or a small unit, right, you get a command, you repeat it, right? You're constantly checking your situational awareness. I'm constantly checking my peripherals to make sure that my unit's moving in the direction it's supposed to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I get the command to move forward, and I'm going to say forward, and I'm going to move forward, and if I move forward and in my peripherals I see that I'm the only one, right, then probably going to be a bad day for me.
What would be the approach for a small unit if they come across a single knight? How best should that small unit approach to take out that knight?
Well, the answer is mug them, right? Especially if you get a
What does that mean?
all right. I'm glad you asked me that question. So as we discussed, right, you have a strong side and you have a blind side, right? So when you maneuver your small unit and you're maneuvering your small unit at a target, whether that target is, the flank of a large shield wall, or, dukes or spears a lot, who's standing out there in the middle of the field with a spear, challenging all comers, right? You want to approach him on your strong side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, you're going to have the tactical advantage of having, presenting your strongest offensive
Mm-hmm.
surface area, right? And also by approaching them on your strong side, having your blind side drag just a little bit, right? You're still being defensive on your flank, right?
Mm-hmm.
While you're being aggressive with your attack surface, which is your strong side, that front 180 that encompasses you and the shield person to your right, unless you're a lefty, in which case it would be reversed, right? So but eventually, once I've engaged with my strong side, right, if I'm not in danger of being flanked, then my blind side shieldman is going to come up and engage as well. So we want to bring as many weapons to bear on that individual as possible. And if we're talking about dukes or spears a lot, who's out there with just a spear, right, that should be an easy kill, right?
So, but you said mugging. What's a mugging?
But just being aggressive, right? So aside from communication, right? So we've talked about the fact that small units need to be agile, they need to be mobile, right? So the purpose of being agile and mobile is to be aggressive, right? I need to see, look at the battlefield objectively, find the areas of opportunity where I can capitalize, what I mean, where I can actually bring my small unit and be the most effective, as we showed you on the screen earlier, where we hit the end of that line, right? We brought 3 weapons to bear on one single individual. It's the same principle, whether it's one person standing alone in the battlefield or I'm engaging in huge battle line, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got to be aggressive. I got to move in fast, right? Don't give them time to think about it. Engage quickly, engage aggressively. And a lot of times, this is a true story. I was after a battle. I was sitting around engaging in some of the fare from the Navy kitchen airs, right? So I had my bacon and my peanut butter and jelly and my soup, and just kind of lounging around, and I had actually had it was me and 2 of my squires on the field in a triad, had hit the side of Callantyr. Callantyr is really disciplined unit, honestly. Callantyr has one in the back in the day had one of the most disciplined shield walls I've ever seen. And they were maneuvering on, I believe Atlantia was their ally, and they were maneuvering to engage Atlantia. And they were moving across the field at a good clip, right? And there was probably 80 of them. I mean, there's a bunch of them, right? So we were attached to another unit that got broken up, and we were wandering the field as a triad, saw Callantyr engaging, hit Callantyr in the flank, right? And did significant damage to that unit. But the most important thing is we stopped their progress, right? As soon as we engaged them and we waded into the first few of them, the cry went down the line is we're being flanked. So the commander, hearing, hey, we're being flanked, assumed that they were being flanked by a huge unit, right? Halted the progress, started to refuse the line, right? and which, you know, they never could get a beat on us because as they were refusing that big line and it was swinging around, we stayed on the flank just munching away, right? And we were able to take out a good number of them before we disengaged and moved on, right? But what we succeeded in doing was completely stopping that disciplined shield wall, turned them completely around, right? And as they turned around to try to engage what they thought was a big unit on their flank, you know, they exposed their flank to the a unit there, Atlantea, that they were trying to attack, and Atlantea just mobbed them and crushed them, right? So would that outcome have been the same had we not engaged that flank and turned it? I don't know. I know it was a whole lot easier for Atlantea to kill them when they were exposing their flank to them because they were chasing this 3-person unit, right? And the best part about it is I'm sitting there enjoying, you know, my post battle repast, right? You know, there's some Calantirians over there, and I can hear them talking. They're like, "Oh yeah, you know, we got flanked with this big unit, spun us around." You know, and I started laughing, and I forget his name. There's a he's a accountant Callantier. I at one point knew him very well, but his name escapes me. But he was like, "Minnie, what's so funny?" And I was like, "Dude, it wasn't a big unit. It was 3 people."
Mhm.
He's like, "No way, man. We were heavily engaged on the flank." And I was like, "Are you talking about when you got hit by Atlantea?" He goes, "Oh, no, no, no. Before we engaged Atlantea," I said, "Yeah, it was me and 2 of my squires.
Mhm.
That's it." You know, and I'm sure when they tell that story, they're going to continue to say they got flanked by a big unit, you know, which you know, I mean, and that's how stories work in the SCA, and that's awesome. But the long and short of it is, one small unit hit them in the flank, stop their progress, turn them around, and completely change their role in the battle. You
So
know,
going back to the idea of a small unit of maybe squires are approaching Sir Spear a lot.
hmm
Um, I guess the Sir Spear-a-Lot's goal would be to try to approach that unit from the blind side to
well, I
to
mean,
try to get around it.
so not in reality. Here's what Sir Spearlot's going to try to do. Sir Spearsalot is going to try to engage you if you're the spearman in the center. He's going to try to engage you at range, and hope that your shieldmen do not react appropriately, right?
Mhm.
Because one of the cardinal sins that most soldiers make in melee, right, is that once engagement begins, right, by the longest ranged weapons, the shieldmen stop,
Mhm.
right? They stop because they're like, oh, we're engaged now, and my job is to be stand here and be defensive. That's not the case, right? So as the pole armsman, as the leader of that unit, you need to make sure that you're urging your men to forward. you know Never stop, be aggressive, move forward. If I engage that spear is tied up, right?
Right,
That's an easy kill for a shieldman,
right.
right? Because that the point in with a spear, once you're past the point, the spear is no longer a danger to you anyway. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? So be aggressive, engage the spear, and make sure your shieldmen know to keep moving, especially on your strong side, right? If you don't feel comfortable, right? Let's say there's other people around the area that could possibly flank you when you engage, keep your blind side shieldman with you, and give your strong side shieldman the go ahead to charge, right?
Mhm.
You got the spear tied up. He's going to go make the easy kill, regroup, move on to the next one. You know,
Right.
um, but be agile, be aggressive, make the most of your opportunities.
Would the strategy change or the tactics change if you're just 3 shieldmen, no spear? Would your approach to the triad
Mhm.
be different if
No,
you're not
not
classical?
appreciably. Not appreciably. So the benefit of having a pole arm in the center of the triad gives you range options, right?
Right.
Um, what it also does, it can have the disadvantage, like I said, of if you don't have properly trained shieldmen, they're going to stop at engagement range, your engagement range, which is far far longer than theirs, right? So if you're in a triad with 3 shields, it's just about being super aggressive, right? You're never going to stop at range, right? Because once that guy reaches out with a spear, I'm going to defeat that spear by blocking it, right? So one parry, and as I'm continuing to move forward, he's got a choice: run or die,
Mhm.
right? There's really no other option when facing 3 shieldmen with a spear,
Right.
So you got to be aggressive. You got to move quickly. You know what I mean? Like I said, get that kill and move on. But even if I'm hitting the flank of another unit, right? Um, I want to be aggressive. My strong side remains the same, right? With 3 shields, if I'm a righty, right, or if I'm 3 righties, or if I have a righty, if I'm fortunate enough to have a lefty on the left side, that is perfect. But if I don't, right, I'm 3 righties, the guy on the left is still protecting my blind side, right? Because my sword arm's on the right. This is where I'm doing the work. This
Mhm.
is where I'm vulnerable. So nothing really changes about my front 180, my arc of attack, right? So and my right hand shieldman's still going to be my more aggressive, my strong side.
Mhm.
So I'm going to present that side, So if I'm angling towards you as an individual, or you're on the end of the line, Guillermo, I'm not going to come at you straight on, with a 3-person front. I'm
Right.
actually going to be angled slightly to where my strong side is forward, right?
Right.
So I'm going to move forward at you at an angle. So once we're in engagement, right, then I can collapse. I can collapse my strong side for a
Mhm.
pseudo envelopment, right? So once I have that pseudo envelopment, you're basically in a cup. You're dead.
Right.
You know,
Right.
um, at the very least, the odds are not on your favor, right? So it's really just about maneuvering for advantage and making sure that you have more weapons on them than they have on you.
All right. Would small unit tactics change depending on the kind of battle you're fighting? Like
Um,
the bridge battle, the ravine battle, the field battle, town
so
battle?
honestly, the only battle that is going to change tactics is limited front. So if I'm in a bridge, limited front, right?
Mhm.
So I'm on a bridge that's x people wide. The triad's not going to benefit me,
Mhm.
right? It's just there's no room, because remember that the key to success is in the triad, the small unit, is agility and mobility, right? I can't be agile or mobile when I have a limited front,
Right.
right? Now, if I have a bridge, and I have some forward points or something that I can cross, where I can go out and be agile and mobile, then yeah. But on a limited front battle, it's best to mix in with a bigger unit, and maintain that limited front. Now, in a town battle, a triad can work, but again, there's going to be scenarios inside the town which are limited front. So if I'm a triad and I'm attacking a doorway and there's 10 people in that building, it's a limited front. I can't really be terribly agile. It's not going to benefit me a whole lot. In a field battle, absolutely, triad is a great way to, if you're not in a larger unit, a triad is a great way to go. Um, and a resurrection battle, like the ravine battle, for example, triad is awesome, right? A lot of times ravine battles get static, right? You get, large pushes in the middle of the field. It kind of ebbs and flows. It bubbles a little
Mhm.
bit, you know. But a triad, a mobile unit, is a great unit for filling gaps, right? You see somebody breaking through, you run over there with your triad, you can fill the gap, right? Or if you see a break in their line, you can push in out there with your triad and do amazing amounts of damage, right, in the backfield, because most of those guys are going to be focused forward, right? So
Mhm.
you push through that line and you got a flank, be mobile, be aggressive, get in there and do all kinds of damage.
Mhm. Right.
So yeah, so it really depends. Like I said, it's a limited front battle. Small units don't help you much, but anything else, they're great.
Awesome. That's a lot.
Yeah,
We covered a lot of territory.
we did. We did. I feel like I'm on a podcast or something.
Well, are there any summary final thoughts you would like to share?
um well, I would like to reiterate, communication is key. Be loud, work together, practice, right? There is no substitute for training, right? And no matter how simple you think the action may be, training it and making it muscle memory always make you better at it, right? Um, so if you're, as you mentioned previously, as a kingdom, we don't melee as much. We don't have melee practices like we used to, and that's a shame because they were always beneficial. I mean, I remember driving, driving to Kissimmee, at least once a month to go out to the war practice at Kissimmee and have
Well,
a.
I would like to say this year, there's been
Mhm,
a concerted effort at Kingdom events to
mhm,
have more melee experiences.
mhm.
And when we had our Duke U, we did have a melee U,
Right,
you know, melee, kind of a melee college where
right.
we train on small bridge battles and how to read the line and to know when to do skirmish tactics and when to close.
Mhm,
So this year there's been a quite a bit more experience and effort made for
mhm.
both melee experience and teaching opportunities.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's awesome, man, because I mean, and Duke U used to be, back when I used to go, um, used to be all about, I mean, you'd have one person there who would give a talk, usually a guest speaker who would give a talk with some useful, interesting stuff. But most of the things that we went over were melee tactics in those days,
Mhm,
what kind of equipment to bring to war, because you get
mhm,
people that show up at a war and they got like a small center grip oval shield and they're like, I'm a shieldman. No, you're not. not
mhm,
not in a war scenario, you're not. If you're in war, you need a bigger shield, you need more surface area, you know um and center boss shields, in my opinion, in war, have their place in skirmish tactics, possibly small unit tactics, but definitely not in a shield wall. The
mhm.
most effective shield walls I've ever seen were big war shields. Um,
Our very
and
first class like this we did, I asked Moose Lodge to come
mhm,
and talk about how they work as a unit and how
mhm,
they train as a unit.
mhm,
And they broke down the kinds of shields to have and
mhm.
is very helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I have a shed full of war shields that I used to bring to war with me, for my household. At one point we were, what, 22, 20, 21, 22 people strong, you know, with war shields, and our standard war shield was a 2x3, you know,
Hmm.
and even with 8 or 9 people, it's pretty effective.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of how you train, and I see a lot of people at practice, and very rarely do you see people break out their war shields, and even when melees are going on and practice melee tactics with their war shield, but which is a shame, because if you don't do it, then you go to war and you break out your war shield, you're gonna be struggling a little bit, you know.
Yeah, you got to know what you're doing. Well, thank you
Absolutely.
so much for this experience and sharing your experience with us. And I look forward to seeing you again in practice very soon. I'm going to
Mhm.
stop the recording now.
Awesome.
And thank you, Tomas, for joining us as well.
Well,
Yeah, thank you. Here, I'll put a face to the name real quick. So
Guillermo, thanks for inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity. Um, you know, uh, Being semi-retired from SEA fighting, I really, not as available as I used to be. And again, I appreciate your tenacity, and you're doing good work here. For people posting these videos, and hopefully somebody will find something useful in this one.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. I'm stopping the recording now.